The crystal chandelier needed cleaning again. Sarah Chen stood on the ladder in the grand foyer of the Riverside Drive mansion, her arms aching as she carefully wiped each individual crystal with a microfiber cloth. Below her, she could hear voices, the billionaire and his business partners discussing a deal in the adjacent study. Their voices carried the confidence of men who had never known real failure, never experienced the kind of loss that strips away everything you thought defined you. The acquisition should close by Friday, one voice said. Henderson is being stubborn about the valuation. Henderson always is, another voice replied with a laugh. That is why his company is failing and ours is not. Sarah's hand paused mid-wipe. She knew exactly what company they were discussing. She knew the valuation was actually fair, that Henderson's stubbornness was justified, that the men in that study were about to overpay by at least $12 million if they were not careful. She knew because she had once sat in rooms just like that one, making deals just like this, wielding the kind of power that came with a $50 million company and a reputation as one of the sharpest minds in consumer electronics. But that was before the betrayal, before the collapse, before she became invisible. Now she was just the cleaning lady, earning $15 an hour to scrub toilets and dust chandeliers in the homes of people who would never look at her long enough to see who she really was. Sarah climbed down from the ladder, her knees protesting. She was 43 years old, but felt 60 some days. She folded the ladder and moved it to the next room, the enormous living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Manhattan glittered across the water, a reminder of everything she had lost. To understand how Sarah Chen went from corner office to cleaning closet, from CEO to invisible domestic worker scrubbing floors in a Manhattan billionaire's mansion, we need to go back 5 years, to a time when her name appeared regularly in Forbes and Business Insider, when people called her a visionary, when the world seemed full of endless possibility. If you are listening to this story, and you're wondering how someone can go from owning a $50 million company to cleaning houses for $15 an hour, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what happened to Sarah Chen could happen to anyone, and the way her story unfolds will leave you speechless. Now, let us go back to where it all began. Sarah Chen had always been brilliant with technology. Growing up in a middle-class family in San Jose, California, the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants who ran a small electronics repair shop, Sarah had learned to take apart and rebuild computers before she was 10 years old. Her parents worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week, saving every penny they could, speaking broken English with customers, but perfect Mandarin at home, dreaming that their daughter would have opportunities they never had. Sarah did not disappoint. She graduated top of her class from UC Berkeley with a degree in electrical engineering, then earned an MBA from Stanford. By 28, she was working as a product development manager at a major consumer electronics firm in Silicon Valley. By 32, she had left to start her own company. Chen Technologies began in 2015 in a small office in Palo Alto with Sarah and 3 employees. The company specialized in affordable smart home devices, specifically targeting middle-income families who could not afford the premium products from big-name brands. Sarah's vision was simple: high-quality technology should not be a luxury. Her products were well-designed, reliable, and priced at nearly half what competitors charged. The market responded enthusiastically. Within 3 years, Chen Technologies had grown to 200 employees, with products sold in major retailers across the United States. By 2018, the company had annual revenue of $78 million. Sarah was named one of Fortune's 40 Under 40 entrepreneurs to watch. She bought a beautiful home in Menlo Park, helped her parents retire comfortably, and felt the deep satisfaction of having built something meaningful from nothing. Sarah was not flashy. While other tech CEOs bought sports cars and threw lavish parties, Sarah drove a modest Honda, lived simply, and reinvested most of the company's profits back into product development and employee benefits. She was known for treating her employees well, remembering birthdays, asking about their families, creating a workplace culture that valued people as much as profits. In early 2019, Chun Technologies caught the attention of a larger competitor, Apex Innovation Group, a multinational corporation with billions in annual revenue. They approached Sarah about a potential partnership. The CEO of Apex, Marcus Whitfield, was a charismatic man in his 50s with silver hair and an easy smile. He spoke eloquently about synergies, about how Chun Technologies products could reach global markets through Apex's distribution network, about how Sarah's vision aligned perfectly with Apex's mission. "We're not trying to buy you out," Marcus told Sarah over lunch at an expensive restaurant in Palo Alto, his eyes sincere behind designer glasses. "We want a true partnership. You would maintain operational control of Chun Technologies as a subsidiary. We provide capital, distribution, and strategic support. You keep doing what you do best, creating products people love." Sarah was cautious. She had heard stories of big companies swallowing smaller ones, of founders who lost control of their own creations. But Marcus seemed genuine. The terms he offered were generous. Sarah would retain a 45% stake in Chun Technologies, Apex would acquire 50%, and the remaining 5% would be distributed among key employees. Sarah would remain CEO, with guaranteed authority over product decisions and company culture. More importantly, the partnership would give Chun Technologies access to international markets Sarah could never reach alone. Her products could help families not just in America, but across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The social impact potential was enormous. After months of negotiation and due diligence, Sarah signed the partnership agreement in June 2019. It was the biggest decision of her professional life, and she believed she was making the right choice. The first year of the partnership went well. Apex provided capital for expanding manufacturing. Chun Technologies products began appearing in stores across Europe and Asia. Revenue doubled. Sarah hired more employees, expanded the product line, and felt vindicated in her decision to partner with Apex. But in early 2020, things began to change. Marcus Whitfield started sending strategic advisors to Chun Technologies headquarters. These advisors sat in on meetings, asked detailed questions about operations, and made suggestions that felt less like advice and more like instructions. When Sarah pushed back, citing her operational authority, Marcus would smile and say he was just trying to help, that she was being too sensitive. Then came the board meetings. As part of the partnership agreement, Apex had the right to appoint 3 members to Chun Technologies' 5-member board. Sarah had not worried about this initially because she trusted Marcus and assumed board decisions would be collaborative. But in a board meeting in March 2020, the Apex-appointed members voted as a bloc for the first time, overruling Sarah's objection to a major shift in product strategy. "The market has spoken," one of the Apex board members said dismissively when Sarah protested. "Premium products generate higher margins. Your focus on affordability is limiting our growth potential." Sarah felt a chill. This was not what they had agreed to. Her entire company philosophy was built on accessibility, on serving middle-income families. Moving to premium pricing would betray everything Chun Technologies stood for. "That was not the deal," Sarah said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I retained operational control. Product strategy is my domain." Marcus Whitfield, attending the meeting remotely, gave her that practiced smile. "Sarah, the board has the right to set strategic direction. That was in the agreement. You are still CEO, still responsible for execution. But strategy is a board-level decision. This is standard corporate governance." Sarah went home that night and read every page of the partnership agreement, which she had reviewed countless times before signing. To her horror, she found the language Marcus referenced. It was buried in Section 12, Paragraph 4, written in dense legal terminology she had not fully parsed. The board did have authority over strategic direction, which could be interpreted broadly enough to include product strategy. Her lawyers had either missed this or not considered it significant. Sarah had trusted the spirit of the agreement more than the letter, and that trust was now being weaponized against her. Over the following months, Sarah fought back. She argued passionately in board meetings. She rallied her employees. She tried to maintain Chin Technologies' original vision even as the board pushed for changes that would transform the company into just another premium brand. But she was outmaneuvered at every turn. The Apex board members voted as a unified bloc, making Sarah's opinions and objections irrelevant. In September 2020, Marcus made his real intentions clear. In a board meeting with lawyers present, he presented a restructuring plan. Chin Technologies would be fully absorbed into Apex Innovation Group. Sarah would be offered a position as Senior Vice President of Product Development within Apex, reporting to Marcus. She would no longer be CEO of her own company. "This is a natural evolution," Marcus said smoothly. Chin Technologies has outgrown its startup phase. It needs the structure and resources of a mature organization. You will have more support, more resources, and frankly, less stress. This is good for everyone. Sarah felt like she was suffocating. "You planned this from the beginning. This whole partnership was just a slow-motion acquisition. You lied to me." Marcus's smile never wavered. "I presented a business opportunity, and you accepted. The terms were clearly stated in the agreement you signed. If you misunderstood those terms, that is unfortunate, but it does not change the legal reality. The board has voted. The restructuring will proceed." Sarah looked around the table at the faces of people she had once trusted. The three Apex board members looked bored, like this was just another routine business matter. Her two allies on the board, longtime supporters who had believed in her vision, looked devastated but helpless. They were outvoted. There was nothing anyone could do. "And if I refuse?" Sarah asked quietly. "Then you will be in breach of your employment agreement and removed as CEO immediately," one of the Apex lawyers said, his tone matter-of-fact. "You would also face legal action for violating your fiduciary duties to the shareholders." Given Apex's majority stake, that litigation would be expensive and likely unsuccessful for you. Sarah felt trapped. She could accept the demotion and watch her company be dismantled from the inside, or she could fight and lose everything anyway while drowning in legal fees. She chose to fight. Sarah hired the best corporate attorneys she could find and sued Apex Innovation Group for fraud, breach of contract, and misrepresentation. She argued that Marcus Whitfield had deliberately misled her about the nature of the partnership, that the contract language about board authority was intentionally obscure, that Apex had engaged in a systematic plan to steal her company. The lawsuit made headlines. Tech blogs covered it extensively. Some supported Sarah, portraying her as a founder betrayed by corporate greed. Others suggested she was naive, that she should have read her contract more carefully, that this was just how business worked. The legal battle consumed Sarah's life for 18 months. The costs were staggering. Her legal fees exceeded $2 million. The stress was crushing. She lost weight, developed insomnia, and found herself unable to think about anything except the case. Her employees at Chin Technologies, many of whom had been with her since the beginning, were caught in the middle, watching helplessly as the company they had built together was systematically transformed. Marcus Whitfield remained calm and confident throughout. He had virtually unlimited resources and an army of lawyers. He characterized Sarah as an ungrateful partner who could not handle the demands of scaling a business, who was now trying to use litigation to extract money from Apex because her own inadequacies had led to her demotion. In March 2022, the judge ruled against Sarah on all counts. The contract was clear, the judge found. Sarah had signed it voluntarily, with legal representation. Apex had operated within the terms of that contract. There was no fraud, no breach, no misrepresentation. Sarah's interpretation of what had been promised verbally did not override the written agreement. The ruling destroyed her. She had not only lost the case, she had lost her company, her reputation, and her financial stability. The legal fees had consumed most of her personal savings. Her stake in Chin Technologies, which would have been worth millions if she had simply accepted the demotion and stayed, was now worth nothing because she had been removed from the company entirely. Apex offered to buy out her shares for a fraction of their value. Take it or leave it. She took it because she had no choice. The buyout, after legal fees and taxes, left her with approximately $400,000. It was not poverty, but it was not security either. Not at 41 years old, with no current income and a professional reputation in tatters. Other companies would not hire her. She was seen as litigious, difficult, a founder who could not handle losing control. The tech industry has a long memory and little patience for people who challenge the established order, even when that challenge is justified. Sarah's parents, who had been so proud of her success, were heartbroken. Her father, who had suffered a stroke during the legal battle, never fully recovered. Her mother called every week, her voice full of worry and unspoken questions about what had gone wrong. Sarah spent 6 months in a fog of depression, barely leaving her house in Menlo Park. She had failed. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for, was gone. She was no longer Sarah Chen, successful entrepreneur. She was just another cautionary tale, another founder who had trusted the wrong people and paid the price. By late 2022, Sarah's savings were dwindling faster than she had anticipated. She had underestimated how expensive it was to live in the Bay Area without income, even living modestly. Her severance was running out. She needed work, any work, but could not bring herself to return to the tech industry, could not face the pitying looks or whispered gossip. In January 2023, Sarah made a decision that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. She left California. She sold her house in Menlo Park, settled her remaining debts, and moved across the country to New York City, where nobody knew her, where she could disappear into anonymity. She arrived in Manhattan with 2 suitcases and about $250,000, the remainder of her savings after selling her house and covering moving expenses. She rented a small studio apartment in Queens, far from the luxury of her previous life but affordable enough that her savings might last a few years if she was careful. But Sarah quickly realized that sitting in her studio apartment spending down her savings was a form of slow death. She needed purpose, needed to do something, even if that something bore no resemblance to her former life. She needed to be useful, to contribute, to feel like she existed in the world again. In March 2023, Sarah did something that 5 years earlier would have seemed impossible. She applied for a job as a house cleaner with a domestic services agency called Prestige Home Care. The agency specialized in placing cleaners and domestic workers in the homes of wealthy Manhattanites, primarily in the Upper West Side and Upper East Side neighborhoods, where billionaires and millionaires lived in mansions and luxury penthouses. The woman who interviewed Sarah, a brisk, middle-aged woman named Patricia, looked at her application with barely concealed skepticism. "You have no experience in domestic work," Patricia said, tapping her pen against the application form. "I am a fast learner," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "I am detail-oriented and reliable. I will work hard." "Why do you want this job?" Patricia asked, her eyes sharp. "You are clearly educated. This seems like a strange choice for someone with your background." Sarah had prepared for this question. She could not tell the truth, that she was a former CEO hiding from her past. "I recently went through a difficult divorce," she lied smoothly. "I need to start over, earn money, keep busy. Cleaning seems honest, straightforward. I like the idea of physical work, of seeing immediate results." Patricia studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. "We will give you a trial period. The pay is $15 an hour. You will start with smaller apartments, work your way up to bigger homes if you prove reliable. Can you start Monday?" "Yes," Sarah said. "I can start Monday." And so Sarah Chen, who had once managed 200 employees and made decisions affecting millions of dollars, began her new career scrubbing toilets and mopping floors in the homes of strangers. The work was physically exhausting in ways she had never experienced. Her first week left her with aching muscles, raw hands, and a bone-deep tiredness that came from hours of bending, lifting, and scrubbing. But there was also something oddly liberating about it. The work had clear parameters. Clean this room, dust that surface, vacuum this floor. When she was done, she could see the results immediately. There were no board meetings, no legal battles, no betrayals. Just work, payment, and the satisfaction of a job completed. For the first few months, Sarah cleaned smaller apartments in Queens and Brooklyn. She learned the best products for different surfaces, the most efficient ways to clean a bathroom, the proper technique for making hospital corners on beds. She learned to be invisible, to work quietly while residents went about their lives, to avoid eye contact, to accept tips with a grateful smile even when they were insultingly small. Patricia at Prestige Home Care was impressed with Sarah's work ethic and attention to detail. By June 2023, she began assigning Sarah to bigger jobs, including homes in Manhattan. The pay was still $15 an hour, but the tips were sometimes better in wealthier neighborhoods, and the homes themselves were fascinating to Sarah, glimpses into lives of extraordinary privilege. In September 2023, Patricia called Sarah with a new assignment. "I have a regular position available," she said. 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8 hours each day. The client is very wealthy, very particular about his home. The previous cleaner left suddenly, and he needs someone immediately. The pay is the same, $15 an hour, but the tips are usually generous. "Are you interested?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Where is the house?" "Riverside Drive, Upper West Side." The client's name is James Hartley. He is a venture capitalist, made his fortune in tech investments. The house is about 8,000 square feet. You will be working with his assistant to coordinate scheduling. James Hartley. The name was familiar to Sarah, though she could not immediately place it. Later that evening, she looked him up online. James Hartley, 48 years old, founder and managing partner of Hartley Capital Partners, one of the most successful venture capital firms in the country. His fund had made early investments in several companies that became unicorns. His personal net worth was estimated at over $2 billion. Sarah stared at his photo on the Hartley Capital website. He was handsome in that polished way wealthy men often are, with dark hair graying at the temples, sharp blue eyes, and an expensive suit. He smiled confidently at the camera, the smile of someone who had never been denied anything important. There was something else about James Hartley that made Sarah pause. She scrolled through several articles about him and his investments. One article from 3 years earlier mentioned that Hartley Capital had invested in Apex Innovation Group, providing growth capital that helped fund Apex's acquisition strategy. Sarah felt a jolt of recognition. James Hartley had indirectly profited from the destruction of her company. His venture capital fund had made money when Apex swallowed Chin Technologies. Of course he had. People like Hartley always made money, regardless of whose lives were destroyed in the process. She should have refused the job. Should have told Patricia she was not interested. But something stubborn and angry in Sarah made her accept. She would clean James Hartley's mansion. She would be invisible in his home. And perhaps, in some small way, she would reclaim a tiny piece of the dignity that men like him had taken from her. If you are enjoying this story, I want you to do something for me right now. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so that you never miss any of our upcoming interesting stories. Now, let us continue. Sarah's first day at the Hartley Mansion was a Monday in late September. The house was located on Riverside Drive, in one of Manhattan's most exclusive neighborhoods. It was a 5-story townhouse built in the 1920s, with a limestone facade, tall windows, and an elegance that spoke of old money even though James Hartley's wealth was decidedly new. A woman named Diane, James's personal assistant, met Sarah at the service entrance on the ground floor. Diane was in her 30s, professionally dressed, and carried a tablet that apparently contained detailed notes about everything related to James Hartley's life. "Mr. Hartley is very particular about his home," Diane said as she walked Sarah through the house, her heels clicking on marble floors. "He expects perfection. Every room should be spotless. He has allergies, so we use only hypoallergenic, fragrance-free cleaning products. He does not like anything moved from its place, so be careful when dusting. If you break something, report it immediately. Sarah nodded, taking mental notes. They walked through room after room of breathtaking luxury, a grand foyer with that crystal chandelier, a formal living room with furniture that looked like museum pieces, a dining room that could seat 20 people, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a home office with state-of-the-art technology, and multiple bedrooms, each more luxurious than the last. Mr. Hartley lives alone, Diane continued. His ex-wife lives in London with their 2 children. They visit occasionally, but not often. He works long hours, usually leaving by 7 in the morning and returning between 8 and 10 at night. He sometimes has business associates over for meetings, so the public areas of the house must always be pristine. I understand, Sarah said quietly. Diane handed her a printed schedule. You will clean different areas of the house on different days. Mondays are the main living spaces. Wednesdays are bedrooms and bathrooms. Fridays are the kitchen, office, and library. Any questions? No, Sarah said. I am ready to start. Diane left, and Sarah began her work. She started with the foyer, carefully climbing the ladder to clean that chandelier, crystal by crystal. The house was silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Sarah lost herself in the repetitive motions, the simple satisfaction of watching each crystal transform from dull to sparkling under her cloth. She did not see James Hartley that first day. He had already left for work when she arrived and had not yet returned when she finished at 4 in the afternoon. She left the way she had come, through the service entrance, invisible and unnoticed. The pattern continued for weeks. Sarah came Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She cleaned every surface of the massive house. She became familiar with James Hartley's life through the objects she dusted and organized: photographs of his children on vacation, expensive art on the walls, shelves full of business books and financial reports, a closet full of tailored suits that probably cost more each than Sarah earned in a month. Sometimes she heard him on phone calls in his study, his voice confident and commanding as he discussed investments and deals. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him as he moved through the house, always in a hurry, always focused on whatever important matter consumed his attention. He never looked at her directly, never spoke to her beyond the occasional hello when they passed in the hallway. Sarah was a ghost in his home, unseen and unmemorable, exactly as she had intended. But being invisible did not mean being deaf. As Sarah cleaned, she heard things. James often had business meetings in his home study, and voices carried through the old house better than people realized. Sarah heard discussions about investments, about companies being evaluated for acquisition, about strategy and valuations and market conditions. And what she heard often made her pause, made her hands still on whatever surface she was cleaning, made her remember who she used to be. One Wednesday afternoon in late October, Sarah was cleaning the hallway outside James's study when she heard voices from a meeting inside. James and 3 others, their conversation animated and focused. The Henderson acquisition is finally moving forward, one voice said. Sarah recognized the topic from weeks earlier when she had been cleaning the chandelier and overheard a similar discussion. We're closing on Friday. $12 million over the original valuation, but Hartley Capital's stake should still return 3x within 2 years. Henderson was smart to hold out, another voice said. He knew his company was worth more than our initial offer. Smart or stubborn? James's voice interjected with a laugh. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference. Sarah continued, wiping the hallway table, her movements automatic. They had overpaid, just as she had predicted months ago. $12 million more than they should have. If she had still been in the business world, if anyone cared about her opinion anymore, she could have told them why the Henderson valuation was inflated, why the projected returns were optimistic, why this deal would likely underperform. But nobody cared what a cleaning lady thought about venture capital deals. Sarah finished the hallway and moved to the next room, pushing the knowledge away, reminding herself that this was no longer her world. Yet she could not help noticing patterns. As weeks turned into months, Sarah heard more meetings, more discussions. And increasingly, she noticed inefficiencies, blind spots, strategic mistakes that James and his partners seemed unable to see. They were smart men, certainly successful by any measure. But they operated in an echo chamber, surrounded by similar voices with similar backgrounds, missing perspectives that might have saved them from errors. Sarah told herself it was not her concern. She was there to clean, not to advise. Her business expertise was irrelevant now. She had learned the hard way that being right did not protect you, that intelligence was no shield against betrayal, that sometimes the smartest thing was to stay silent and invisible. But staying silent became harder in mid-November, when Sarah overheard a conversation that made her stop dead in the middle of dusting James's study bookshelves. James was on a video call, his face toward his computer screen, his back to where Sarah worked quietly in the corner. He did not realize she was there, or perhaps he simply did not consider that a cleaning lady might understand or care about his business discussions. "The Apex Innovation Partnership looks promising," James was saying. "They are looking for growth capital to fund their next round of acquisitions. Marcus Whitfield has been very forthcoming about their strategy." Sarah's hands froze on the bookshelf. Marcus Whitfield. Apex Innovation Group. The name sent ice through her veins. "I have some concerns about their acquisition model," a voice from the computer said. "They seem to absorb companies and then strip them for parts rather than building long-term value." "That is one interpretation," James replied dismissively. "I see it as efficient capital allocation. They buy underperforming companies, restructure them, and extract value. That is what investors want to see." "What about the founders of those companies?" the voice asked. "I have heard complaints, lawsuits even." James shrugged. "Founders are often too emotionally attached to their companies to make rational decisions. Sometimes they need to be moved aside for the company's own good. Apex has been very successful with their model. The numbers speak for themselves." Sarah felt rage building in her chest, hot and suffocating. The numbers. The numbers did not show the human cost, the lives destroyed, the dreams stolen. The numbers did not reflect that Marcus Whitfield was a liar and a thief who used legal complexity to mask theft. The numbers certainly did not show what happened to founders like Sarah Chin, who trusted the wrong people and paid with everything they had built. She wanted to scream at James Hartley, wanted to tell him exactly what Apex Innovation Group really was, wanted to explain that his investment would fund more betrayals like hers. But she was just the cleaning lady. Her voice did not matter. Her perspective was irrelevant. Sarah finished dusting the bookshelves in silence, her movements mechanical, her mind churning with anger and frustration. She left the study without James ever acknowledging her presence. She was invisible, and invisibility was safety, even when it felt like suffocation. That evening, back in her small studio apartment in Queens, Sarah could not stop thinking about what she had heard. James Hartley was going to invest in Apex. His venture capital money would help Marcus Whitfield destroy more companies, betray more founders. And there was nothing Sarah could do about it. Or was there? Sarah sat at her small desk and opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She could send an anonymous email to James Hartley, warning him about Apex. She could lay out the facts, explain the pattern of acquisition and betrayal, describe what had happened to Chin Technologies. She could try to stop this. But would he listen? Would a billionaire venture capitalist take anonymous advice seriously? Would he even read an email from an unknown source? Or would it go straight to spam or be dismissed as the ravings of a disgruntled former employee? Sarah closed her laptop without writing anything. It was pointless. James Hartley lived in a different world, a world where people like Sarah did not exist except as service providers. He would invest in Apex, probably make money on the deal despite the human cost, and never know or care about the destruction his capital enabled. Sarah returned to the mansion the following Monday, prepared to remain silent, to stay in her lane, to be the invisible cleaning lady who overheard but never spoke. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was a Friday afternoon in early December, cold and gray outside, when Sarah's carefully maintained invisibility shattered completely. She was cleaning James's study, as she did every Friday, moving methodically through the room while James worked at his desk. He was focused on his computer, typing rapidly, occasionally speaking into his phone, entirely absorbed in whatever deal he was working on. Sarah was wiping down the bookshelf near his desk when she noticed a document lying face up on his printer. It was a financial analysis of some kind, dense with numbers and projections. She should not have looked. It was none of her business. But her eyes, trained by years of analyzing business documents, automatically scanned the page. And what she saw made her blood run cold. It was a projected return analysis for the Apex Innovation investment. The model showed expected returns based on Apex's planned acquisitions over the next 3 years. But the projections were based on fundamentally flawed assumptions about market conditions, about competition, about the sustainability of Apex's acquisition model. Sarah could see, with painful clarity, that whoever had built this model had made critical errors. They had overestimated market growth rates, underestimated regulatory risks, and failed to account for the increasing backlash against aggressive acquisition strategies. If James Hartley invested based on this analysis, Hartley Capital would lose money. Possibly a lot of money. She should have walked away. Should have finished cleaning and left, maintaining her invisibility. But something in Sarah snapped. She could not watch another person make a catastrophic mistake based on false information, even if that person was a billionaire who would never have given her a second thought in her previous life. "Excuse me," Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. James Hartley did not respond, still focused on his computer screen. Sarah cleared her throat and spoke louder. "Excuse me, Mr. Hartley." He looked up, his expression startled and slightly annoyed at the interruption. His eyes focused on her for perhaps the first time since she had started working in his home 3 months earlier. "Yes," he said, his tone making clear that whatever she had to say should be brief. Sarah's heart pounded. She gestured toward the document on the printer. "I apologize for disturbing you, but I could not help noticing that financial analysis. The projected returns for the Apex Innovation investment. The model has some significant errors." James stared at her as if she had just spoken in a foreign language. "I am sorry, what?" Sarah felt heat rise to her face but pressed on. "The analysis. The market growth assumptions are too optimistic given current Federal Reserve policy. And the model does not account for increased regulatory scrutiny of aggressive acquisition strategies. The projected 3-year return of 18% is unrealistic. You would be lucky to break even." For a long moment, James Hartley simply stared at her, his mouth slightly open, clearly unable to process that his cleaning lady was critiquing his financial models. Then his expression hardened into something between amusement and irritation. "I appreciate your concern," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "but I think my team of analysts, who all have degrees from top business schools, probably understand financial modeling better than—" He paused, clearly not even knowing her name. "Than the cleaning staff." The dismissal was clear. Sarah should have accepted it, should have apologized and returned to her work. But years of being silenced, of being ignored, of watching mediocre men make preventable mistakes because they refused to listen to perspectives different from their own, made something in her rebel. "With respect, Mr. Hartley," Sarah said, her voice steady now, "your analysts made 3 specific errors. First, they are using a compound annual growth rate based on the last 5 years of market performance, but that period includes artificially low interest rates that are not coming back. Second, they are not factoring in the increasing political pressure on monopolistic acquisition strategies, particularly in the tech sector. Third, and most importantly, they are treating Apex Innovation as a growth investment when it is actually a value play that has already peaked." James had stopped looking amused. He was now looking at her with intense focus, his analyst's brain clearly processing what she had just said despite his obvious confusion about who was saying it. "How do you know any of this?" he asked slowly. Sarah hesitated. This was the moment where her carefully constructed anonymity would end. She could lie, could make up some story about having read about finance in her spare time. Or she could tell the truth and risk everything. She chose truth. Because, Sarah said quietly, 5 years ago, I was CEO of Chin Technologies, a $50 million consumer electronics company. And Apex Innovation Group, the company you are about to invest in, destroyed my business through legal manipulation and strategic deception. So I know exactly how they operate, and I know your investment model is based on false assumptions about their business practices. The silence in the study was absolute. James Hartley stared at her, his expression moving through disbelief, confusion, and finally something that might have been understanding. "You are Sarah Chin," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "I am Sarah Chin. And for the last 3 months, I have been cleaning your house for $15 an hour while listening to you and your colleagues discuss investments in companies that destroy people like me." James Hartley stood up from his desk slowly, still staring at her as if seeing a ghost. "I remember your case. The lawsuit against Apex. It was all over the tech blogs 2 years ago. You lost." "I lost everything," Sarah corrected quietly. "Not just the case." James walked around his desk, leaning against it as he studied her. "Why are you here? Why are you working as a cleaner when you have an MBA from Stanford and ran a multi-million-dollar company?" Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "Because after you lose everything, after your reputation is destroyed, after you spend $2 million on legal fees fighting a battle you cannot win, nobody in the tech industry will hire you. You become radioactive. So you take what work you can get and you survive." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the financial analysis from his printer and handed it to Sarah. "Show me. Show me specifically what is wrong with this model." Sarah took the document, her hands trembling slightly. She sat down in one of the chairs facing James's desk and began to go through the analysis line by line, explaining the flawed assumptions, the missing risk factors, the overly optimistic projections. As she spoke, she felt herself transforming, the cleaning lady persona falling away, the CEO she used to be emerging from beneath years of invisibility. James listened intently, asking sharp questions, challenging her assertions, forcing her to defend her analysis. It was the kind of rigorous intellectual conversation Sarah had not had in years, and despite the bizarre circumstances, she felt herself coming alive in a way she had forgotten was possible. After 30 minutes of discussion, James sat back in his chair and ran his hand through his hair. "You are right," he said finally. "About all of it. The model is flawed. The Apex investment is riskier than we thought." "It is worse than risky," Sarah said quietly. "It is funding a company that systematically destroys the founders they acquire from. Marcus Whitfield is not a builder. He is a corporate raider dressed up as a visionary. Your capital will enable more betrayals like mine." James looked at her for a long moment. "Why did you tell me? You could have just let me make the investment, let me lose money. After everything that happened to you, you could have taken satisfaction in watching another wealthy investor make a stupid mistake." Sarah had asked herself the same question. "Because," she said slowly, "what happened to me was unjust. But that does not mean I want to see injustice continue. And because watching people make preventable mistakes based on bad information bothers me, even when those people are billionaires who would never have noticed me otherwise." James stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. When he spoke, his voice was different, less certain, more thoughtful. "Sarah Chun, I need to be honest with you. When Hartley Capital invested in Apex Innovation Group 3 years ago, providing them with growth capital for their acquisition strategy, we helped enable what they did to your company. We did due diligence on Apex, on Marcus Whitfield, but we focused on the numbers, the returns. We did not ask enough questions about how those returns were generated or what happened to the founders of acquired companies. That was a failure of judgment on my part." It was the closest thing to an apology Sarah had received from anyone in the investment world that had indirectly profited from her destruction. She did not know what to say. James turned back to face her. I have a question for you. What are you doing here? Not just in my house, but in New York, working as a cleaner, when you clearly still have one of the sharpest business minds I have encountered in years. Why are you not rebuilding, starting over, getting back in the game? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what capital? What credibility? I am 43 years old, with a failed company behind me and a reputation as someone who sues their partners. Nobody will invest in me. Nobody will hire me. I am done in that world, Mr. Hartley. James, he corrected. And you are only done if you accept that you are done. But what if there was another option? Sarah looked at him warily. What do you mean? James walked back to his desk and sat down, his expression intense and focused in a way that suggested his mind was already 3 steps ahead. Hartley Capital invests in people as much as in ideas. We look for exceptional founders who can identify opportunities and execute on them. You clearly have extraordinary insight into market dynamics, operational strategy, and the tech industry. You understand both the technical and business sides. That combination is rare. I also have a history of catastrophic failure, Sarah pointed out. Not exactly the kind of track record that inspires investor confidence. You have a history of being betrayed by someone who is very good at manipulation, James corrected. There is a difference between failing because you lack confidence and being destroyed by someone who weaponized your trust. The fact that you got as far as you did, that you built a $50 million company from scratch, that you fought for 2 years to defend what you built, those things tell me more about your character than the fact that you ultimately lost. Sarah felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. What are you suggesting? She asked carefully. James leaned forward. I am suggesting that you stop cleaning my house and start working with me. Not for me, with me. I want you to join Hartley Capital as a special advisor. Your role would be to evaluate potential investments, particularly in the tech sector, with a focus on operational sustainability and founder dynamics. You would help us avoid making investments in companies like Apex that generate returns through ethically questionable practices. And you would help us identify founders who deserve support, who are building companies the right way. Sarah stared at him. You want to hire me? As an advisor? After I have spent 3 months cleaning your toilets. I want to hire you because you spent 3 months cleaning my toilets and still had the integrity to warn me about a bad investment, even though you could have let me walk into it blindly, James said firmly. I want to hire you because you understand the human cost of business decisions in a way that most investors never will. I want to hire you because in 30 minutes of conversation, you identified flaws in a financial model that a team of Ivy League analysts missed. Yes, Sarah. I want to hire you. What about my reputation? What about the lawsuit, the failure? Sarah asked, her voice shaking slightly. I will be honest with you. Some potential partners and portfolio companies might have concerns initially. But I believe that if we are transparent about what happened to you, if we frame your experience as a learning opportunity rather than a failure, most reasonable people will see the value you bring. And for those who cannot see past the surface story, well, I am not interested in working with them anyway. James pulled out a notebook and started writing. Here is what I am thinking. We start with a 6-month consulting contract at $200,000 prorated. That gives us both a chance to see if this works without a long-term commitment. If it goes well, we talk about a permanent position, equity stake, the whole package. You would have an office here, access to all our research, and a voice in investment decisions. What do you think? Sarah felt dizzy. $200,000 for 6 months. That was more than she had earned in the last year of cleaning houses. It was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild, a return to the world she thought she had lost forever.
But it was also terrifying.
What if she failed again? What if she had lost her edge, her instincts? What if working in venture capital, helping to make the same kind of decisions that had indirectly funded her own destruction, felt impossible? I need to think about it, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, James said. Take the weekend. But Sarah, I want you to understand something. You did not fail. You are failed by a system that rewards predatory behavior and punishes trust. That is not the same thing.
And you have a choice now.
You can stay invisible, stay safe, keep cleaning houses, and let the world believe that Sarah Chin was just another failed entrepreneur. Or you can step back into the arena, use your experience and expertise to help build something better, and prove that one betrayal does not define your entire story. Sarah left the Hartley mansion that afternoon in a daze. She walked all the way from Riverside Drive to her studio apartment in Queens, barely noticing the cold December air, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. She thought about her parents, about what they would say. Her mother had been worried about her for so long. Ever since the lawsuit, ever since Sarah had stopped being the successful daughter they were so proud of. This opportunity could change that, could restore some of what had been lost. She thought about her former employees at Chen Technologies, people whose careers had been disrupted when the company was absorbed into Apex. Some had found other jobs, but others had struggled, had been caught in the same industry reluctance that had frozen Sarah out. If she took this position with Hartley Capital, if she had influence over investment decisions, she could help ensure that venture capital money went to companies that treated their employees well, that built sustainable businesses rather than extractive ones. She thought about Marcus Whitfield and Apex Innovation Group. James had mentioned canceling the Apex investment based on her analysis. That felt like a small victory, a tiny bit of justice in a world that had shown her very little. But it was not enough. The real victory would be using her position at Hartley Capital to help build a better ecosystem, one where founders like her were protected rather than exploited. By the time Sarah reached her apartment, she had made her decision. That Sunday evening, she sent James Hartley an email. It was brief and professional. "Mr. Hartley, I accept your offer. I can start Monday. Thank you for seeing past the cleaning lady to the person I used to be and the person I still am. Sarah Chun." James's response came within minutes. "Sarah, I will see you Monday at 9. We have work to do." And for the record, I did not see past the cleaning lady. I saw that the cleaning lady and the CEO were the same person all along. Most people just were not paying attention. James. Monday morning, Sarah walked into the Hartley Capital offices in Midtown Manhattan wearing a business suit she had not worn in 2 years, carrying a briefcase that felt both foreign and familiar. The receptionist directed her to James's executive floor, where he met her with a smile and a handshake. "Welcome to Hartley Capital," he said. "Let me introduce you to the team." The reactions from James's partners and analysts ranged from polite curiosity to obvious skepticism. A few had heard of Sarah Chun and the lawsuit against Apex. Most were simply confused about why James had hired someone with such an unconventional recent work history. But James made it clear that Sarah was there with his full support and that her perspective would be valued. Sarah's first weeks at Hartley Capital were challenging. She had to rebuild confidence that had been shattered by years of failure and invisibility. She had to learn the venture capital perspective, which was different from running an operating company. She had to navigate office dynamics and professional relationships after spending so long alone or invisible. But she also discovered that her years of suffering had given her insights that others lacked. When evaluating potential investments, Sarah could see warning signs that others missed. She could identify founders who were vulnerable to manipulation, companies whose operational models were unsustainable, deals that looked good on paper but were built on questionable practices. Her analysis killed several deals that James's team had been excited about. At first, this created tension. Some partners resented that this newcomer was vetoing investments they had spent months developing. But when 2 of those deals, which proceeded with other investors after Hartley Capital passed, subsequently failed in exactly the ways Sarah had predicted, opinions began to shift. 3 months into her consulting contract, James called Sarah into his office. "The board met this morning," he said without preamble. "We want to offer you a permanent position as partner at Hartley Capital, focused on tech investments and founder dynamics. Salary of $500,000, plus quarterly bonuses based on fund performance, plus 3% equity in the fund. Are you interested?" Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes.
Partner. Equity.
A salary that exceeded what she had earned even as CEO of Chin Technologies. But more than the money, it was the validation, the recognition that she had value, that her experience and expertise mattered. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I am very interested." "Good," James said, smiling. "Because we need you. The fund is performing better than ever, and a significant part of that is because you have kept us from making stupid investments in predatory companies. You have also helped us identify founders who are building something real, something sustainable. That is the kind of investing I want Hartley Capital to be known for." Over the following year, Sarah rebuilt her reputation in the tech investment world. She became known as someone who understood both the technical and human sides of business, someone who could identify not just good opportunities but good people. Portfolio companies began requesting her involvement specifically, knowing that her guidance would help them avoid the pitfalls that had destroyed her own company. She reconnected with former colleagues from Chin Technologies, helping several of them find new opportunities or even start their own ventures. She became a mentor to young founders, particularly women and immigrants who faced additional challenges in the tech world. She spoke openly about what had happened to her, not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as someone who had learned hard lessons and wanted to help others avoid similar mistakes. And she made peace with her past. She would never get Chin Technologies back, would never undo the betrayal or erase the years of suffering. But she could use those experiences to build something better, to help create a tech ecosystem that valued integrity as much as innovation. One morning, about 18 months after she had warned James about the Apex investment, Sarah walked into a coffee shop in Manhattan and came face to face with Marcus Whitfield. He was sitting at a table with several other businessmen, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. Their eyes met across the room, and Marcus's expression flickered with surprise and something else, discomfort perhaps, or guilt. Sarah had imagined this moment many times over the years. She had imagined confronting him, telling him exactly what he had cost her, making him acknowledge the destruction he had caused. But now, face to face with the man who had destroyed her company, she felt mostly pity. Marcus Whitfield was still playing the same games, still using the same tactics, still building nothing of lasting value despite all his wealth and success. Sarah walked past his table without stopping, ordered her coffee, and left. Marcus Whitfield no longer had power over her. He was just another bad actor in an industry full of them, and she was doing her part to make sure he could cause less harm going forward. That evening, Sarah had dinner with her parents in the small apartment she had bought for them in Flushing, Queens. Her father, recovered from his stroke but moving more slowly now, hugged her tightly when she arrived. Her mother had cooked all of Sarah's favorite dishes, the kitchen filled with the smells of her childhood. "We are so proud of you," her mother said, as they sat around the table. "We always knew you would rise again." Sarah smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. "I could not have done it without you. When everyone else gave up on me, you still believed." Her father raised his glass. To Sarah Chin, who fell down and got back up. "This is the real success, not the company or the money, but the strength to keep going." They drank together, and Sarah felt a peace she had not experienced in years. She had lost everything, had been reduced to scrubbing toilets in the homes of people who looked through her like she was invisible. But she had survived. More than survived, she had rebuilt, not just her career but her sense of self, her understanding of what really mattered. 2 years after that dinner, Sarah launched her own venture capital fund, Chin Capital Partners, with James Hartley as her primary backer and mentor. The fund focused specifically on supporting underrepresented founders and companies committed to ethical business practices. In her first year, she raised $80 million and made investments in 12 companies. One of those companies was started by a former Chin Technologies employee who had struggled to find funding after the Apex acquisition. Under Sarah's guidance and support, that company grew rapidly and was eventually acquired by a major tech firm for $200 million. The founder, at the announcement party, publicly thanked Sarah for believing in him when nobody else would. Sarah Chin taught me that failure is not permanent, that betrayal does not define you, and that the most important thing in business is not just making money, but building something you can be proud of, he said in his speech. She lived those lessons before she taught them to me. Sarah stood at the back of the room, watching as this young founder celebrated his success, and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This was what mattered. Not the money in her account, not the prestige of her title, but the knowledge that she was helping build an ecosystem where people like her, people who had been knocked down and counted out, could rise again. She thought about the version of herself who had stood on a ladder in James Hartley's foyer 2 years earlier, scrubbing a crystal chandelier for $15 an hour, listening to conversations about investments and deals, and feeling the ache of invisibility. That woman had survived the worst that life could throw at her, had maintained her integrity even when it seemed pointless, had held onto her knowledge and expertise even when nobody valued them. And that survival, that stubbornness, that refusal to let betrayal and failure define her, had made possible everything that came after. Sarah Chen's story was not a simple tale of redemption, of rising from poverty to wealth. It was something more complex and more human, a story about identity, about what you do when everything that defined you is stripped away, about the choice to remain yourself even when the world tells you that you no longer matter. She had been a CEO, then a cleaning lady, then a CEO again. But through all those transformations, she had remained Sarah Chen, brilliant and determined, capable of seeing what others missed, unwilling to watch people make preventable mistakes even when those mistakes might have felt like justice. And in the end, that consistency of character, that core identity that survived every loss and humiliation, was what allowed her not just to rebuild her career, but to build something better than what she had lost. Because Sarah had learned, in the hardest way possible, that success built on trust and integrity is fragile, but success built on wisdom gained through suffering has foundations that cannot be shaken. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah slipped out of the party and walked through the Manhattan streets toward her apartment in the Upper West Side, not far from the mansion where she had once cleaned floors. The city lights sparkled around her, full of possibility and promise. She had been broken and rebuilt herself. She had been invisible and made herself seen again. She had lost everything and discovered what truly mattered. And she had done it not by becoming someone different, but by refusing to forget who she had always been, even when she was cleaning toilets and dusting chandeliers, even when the world had dismissed her as just another failed entrepreneur, even when hope seemed like a foolish luxury. Sarah Chen had survived. And in surviving with her integrity intact, she had won something more valuable than the companies she lost, the unshakable knowledge that her worth was not determined by her circumstances, that her expertise and insight had value regardless of her job title, and that sometimes the most important person who needs to see you is yourself. The billionaire who discovered his cleaning lady was really a CEO learned an important lesson that day, that human potential cannot be measured by current circumstances, that brilliance can exist anywhere if you are willing to look for it, and that sometimes the most valuable people in your life are the ones you have been looking through, as if they were invisible. But Sarah Chen learned something even more important, that you can lose everything except yourself, that survival with integrity is its own form of victory, and that the path back from rock bottom is paved not with luck or charity, but with the stubborn refusal to let the worst moments of your life define the rest of your story. Please subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.